Welcome to Sun, Seed, and Rain. We have a very exciting podcast for you here. We're going to talk about the three different kinds, the three Greek words for love, and define them. But let me share with you, here's what we're going to cover today. Jesus made a very specific warning about the last days. We want to talk about that. We'll also cover what is the greatest commandment for the church. What was the greatest thing that Jesus asked us to do? We'll define the three main Greek words for love, and we'll talk about how these three levels of love apply in marriage. So it's going to be a very interesting podcast, so I encourage you to stay tuned. So first of all, let's talk about the warning that Jesus gave. You know, you can see in just reading the news, looking around, in the culture, there's a lot of hatred and division and strife and debate over what is the right thing, the right way to do things, and so on. And there is also a great disregard, a growing disregard for law and civil order. And Jesus warned about these things. He actually said in Matthew 24, verse 12, he said, "And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold." So on one hand, he's talking about lawlessness, and on the other, he's talking about love. So let's reflect upon that just a little bit. See, lawlessness and love are really on opposite ends of the social spectrum. The Bible calls hatred the same as murder. Love, on the other hand, is other-centered, but lawlessness is self-centered. So love desires to keep the commandments of God and to submit to the civil government, but lawlessness rebels against all authority, whether it's human or divine. Lawlessness demands its own way, no matter what the consequences are. And this is not the way of love. And Jesus warned us that when lawlessness begins to arise and become stronger and stronger in the culture, then the love of many people will grow cold, but it doesn't have to be that way. See, whether we walk in love or not, it's not dependent upon what other people are doing. It's based on our relationship with God and our desire to walk in the love of God toward others. So walking in love means keeping the laws of God and being submitted to the civil authorities, the government that God has placed over us. So in Romans chapter 13, we see a comment on this. The Apostle Paul wrote, "And let every soul be subject to the governing authorities." He's referring here to civil government. "For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God." Whether they're national, state, local, these are authorities that God has appointed. The idea of having civil authority to maintain rule and law and order is something, it's a God idea, and it's necessary among men. There have been times in the Bible where there was no law, there was no civil authority, and those times were characterized by violence and people taking whatever they wanted from other people. And it was a very violent time. And I'm talking about the pre-flood earth prior to God sending the flood that we call the flood of Noah. So also in this chapter in Romans 13, the Apostle Paul wrote this. He said, "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, they're all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law." And so when we think about culture and these basic commandments that God gave us in the 10 Commandments, these are commandments that teach us how to do no harm to our neighbor. Do we want our neighbor stealing from us while we're gone? Is our wife and children safe around our neighbor? Is our neighbor a violent person who might possibly murder us? Okay, all of these things, these commandments that God gave us, when they're kept, they build trust in the community. In other words, there is a social fabric, and it's based on trust. But that trust is based upon people keeping the commandments of God. So those 5 commandments that God gave us: do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness or lie about your neighbor, and do not covet. These things actually, when we keep them, they build the social fabric. But when they're broken, it rips and tears the social fabric, where people realize, hey, I can't trust my neighbors, therefore the society becomes more violent. People arm themselves because they don't trust the person living next door to them. But we can be one of those people that walks in love towards others, where other people can trust us because we're a safe person and we're keeping the commandments. So as Paul concluded, love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. So when lawlessness abounds in parts of the culture, those of us who keep the commandments, we are actually rebuilding the social trust and the social fabric that's so necessary in our communities. So the next question we want to consider is, what is the greatest commandment that Jesus, the Son of God, gave to us? When he came down here on earth, he was the Son of God, the Savior of the world. But what was the greatest commandment that he ever gave us? Now there was a Pharisee who came to Jesus and he said, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus said, "Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength." Now that was the greatest commandment in the law. And that's why Jesus said that was the greatest commandment in the law. But it's not the greatest commandment ever given. It was the greatest commandment in the law. We don't live under the law, as admirable and as much value as we can receive from studying the teachings of the law. Nevertheless, we live under the new covenant. And on the night when Jesus, right before he was going to be crucified and shed his blood for us, he entered into a new covenant with his people. And he, at the Last Supper, at the Passover meal, he said, "This is my body broken for you, and this is my blood, which has been shed for you." He entered into a covenant relationship with his disciples. So it was a new covenant. And at the same time, on the same evening, he gave a new commandment, which is coupled with and goes along with the new covenant. When you had the old covenant, God created an old covenant and he had commandments, the old commandments, the 10 commandments. They're still valuable today. But here's the new commandment that Jesus gave us. He said, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." That's from John 13, verses 34 to 35. Then in John 15, verses 12 and 13, Jesus said this. He's repeating his new commandment in case somebody had forgotten it already. "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." And in John 15, 17, he says, "These things I command you, that you love one another." The greatest commandment for the church is to love one another as Jesus has loved us. And those are words directly from the mouth of the Savior. And so it's very important that we, in our churches and in our personal lives, that we emphasize walking in the love of God. Our faith works by love. And so when we walk in love, everything goes so much better. Now, I'm talking a lot about love, and just to run a quick commercial here, I did write a book called Every Bible Verse on Love, and it contains all the Greek and Hebrew words that are used to translate it as any form of the word love, contains every verse containing love, and this book is a valuable resource. And in the links below, you can find how you can get your own copy of this.